a young boy had been killed. And that led her to say, uh, back in the 1970s, there was a young girl over in another part of our community, a similar thing happened to. And I want to say I haven't uttered this for all those years. And the young girl's name was Dawn Peterson. And so I said, that's Dawn Peterson. It's like it was in neon in front of my eyes. And she went and queried it, and it actually was. And we haven't talked about that since 1977. So if we had a way to go and find those file cabinets where the useful stuff is through our experiences and all the really, the cool things that we need in those moments where we're desperate and we're not quite sure how to react to things. I just wonder how would we go about doing something like that? I'm good for now.
Well, you said it's a prompt, so my thought is that's what's going to unlock that memory, or my sister calls it shark music, or unlock that emotion, that you forgot that hit you in a bad way so many years ago, and then it's bringing up that trauma again. Um, but I think just like our conversations here, every time somebody brings up one thing, somebody else remembers uh, another piece that relates to it, and it could be. I mean, we all have different experiences from it, so it's kind of interesting when that happens. But I think obviously a trigger or a memory is something that's going to bring it out in you. If there was a way to, and you could provide your own triggers, your own, but I could do that by watching some YouTube videos. I go, oh yeah, I remember that. I learned that from somebody else many years ago, or like Ken does with the books, and or I bring up a YouTube video or a famous person that said this about that. It's kind of, I think it's all there, but it would be interesting if we could just access it voluntarily. Like I want to know about the moon right now. Let me open up that file.
Well, the really cool thing about being in conversation, especially with people that you trust, okay, is that it's going to unlock those areas you don't know that you don't know you've forgotten.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I really appreciate the cliche of folks saying, you don't know. And all that is that's that opportunity to grow. That's that opportunity to start asking new, better questions. And the neat part of it is that if you do this with different groups of people, some like family, or over the last 3 years, our high school graduating class has really gotten to be very good friends on Facebook. And so we get together socially, and we have these great old conversations, and always something comes up that I had forgotten that ever happened. And then it was back there as vividly as in my memory as when it actually did happen, or that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, maybe as you're saying, and from what Lisa was saying, the stuff that we don't know, and maybe that's just keeping, as we do here, keeping the conversation going, because every conversation triggers a different file in the memory bank. And so it's just keeping the conversations going between different individuals, because this way, I mean, yes, it would be nice to trigger those things before you had the conversation, you know, and maybe those are much more things that are conversations with yourself. So maybe, you know, I mean, if you talk out loud to yourself, people might think you're crazy, you know, I talk to myself all the time. Lisa too. But people might say I'm crazy. But, is maybe, keeping in conversation, obviously, like we have here, but maybe it is having conversations with yourself, or, those thoughts.
You don't know what you do know is what I've been saying lately. I mean, that, like, most recently, it's like you don't know what you know, because I forget things I know till somebody prompts it in me, and then I'll go, well, if you try
Mhm.
this, and then they go, how do you know that? And I go, well, it's there.
I'm wondering if you circle back around, if this isn't all just symptomatic of integration,
Hmm.
because like if let's use running, if you've got a good pair of running shoes, you don't notice them because they're doing their job as part of an integrated experience that we call running.
Yeah.
So, but from the second you buy them, you bought a pair of eventually worn out running shoes. So, so at some point they're not going to be good running shoes anymore, and then like your knee starts to hurt, and now you access what you know about the benefit of a proper pair of running shoes as the equipment you need to run safely. So you notice it, you replace them, then you forget again until you need to notice it again. It's funny. We do this. We have this 5-step approach to training, in our businesses, and it's this thing where it's teach, support, feedback, accountability. Integration is the final step, and that final step is a caution to remember that when someone's truly integrated their skill set into the team, you'll forget what a good job they're doing. So sometimes you have to step back and remember, they've almost become invisible because they're just doing it the way it's supposed to be done. So you got to like remind them, hey, we still notice you. We appreciate it. What you're doing has value. It's just you're so good at it. We don't notice. Like if you watch football, you only notice the offensive line when they mess up. You know, the center messes up the snap and there's a fumble. Everybody's looking at the center, but the other 60 snaps that went perfectly, no one's looking at them. They're looking at the quarterback. So maybe there's that part of it too, where it's okay if we forget because there's no need for us to invest the energy in remembering at that moment.
Well, and as you're talking, and I'm sitting there thinking of the physical body, because most of the time, if we're working optimally, you know, we don't really notice quite a number of parts of our body, and then all of a sudden, obviously, when we get hurt or we get injured, and all of a sudden that area of the body becomes very, very loud. Like we notice it a lot, and you know, and that, and so that just reminded me of what you were saying. We don't notice stuff until all of a sudden, and whether it be a football player or
Yeah.
someone who's supposed to do their job, like is not doing all those 5 levels of your, let's say, training, personnel training or levels, when something's
Yeah.
missing their behalf, all of a sudden, I'm sure that, you notice that, right?
Oh,
So,
I remember when I blew out my shoulder, for like all of a sudden realizing how hard it is to tie your shoes with one hand
Yeah.
or
right.
put on a sock, or even shampoo your hair. It was crazy the things that you take for granted. You're right, because it was just integrated. And all of a sudden that's like removed. And now you have this massive realization of just the value that were just taking for granted for so long, you know?
And I think it's always very humbling. Like it's like,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like almost like this humbling feeling of, I fractured my right forearm, my radius. So that has to do with rotation and everything. And so opening up a bottle or a doorknob
Yeah.
all of a sudden becomes a really big deal. And, how do you open up a bottle when you can't stabilize with that arm and you're trying to use the other
Mm-hmm.
hand? So all of a sudden you're using your knees to wedge
Yep.
something. You use your strong hand. And so, so it is humbling because all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, and it's humbling in the fact that you might have to ask for help. And I always love saying that might have to ask because with this sort of trepidation, it's like, oh my gosh, I might have to rely on someone else.
Yeah.
And see, right there's the magic, okay? Because we started off, and Lisa, again, the definition of integration was the act of integrating. Is that,
Yeah, yeah, a brilliant statement. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah? And and here's what I hear about it. It's a tense in terms of while the action of integrating is going on, that's integration. So when you get to what Ken was talking about, where everything fits together and it's now not noticed as being a part, it's integrated, and integrity is there, full integrity,
Mhm.
and a little bit different in, of a a definition than integrity being good, or you're a person of your word, or you always do the right thing, or that sort of thing. How about integrity as just being complete and whole? Like the integrity of a balloon. If any part of that balloon is not present, it's now just a lump of rubber on the floor. Or integrity of the hull of a ship, or a submarine. Really noticeable quickly on a submarine when the hull integrity is not good. So when you're thinking of it being more about being complete and whole, as opposed to putting things together, I think the cultural definition of integration that my generation grew up with really kind of got us off track from what was really possible. And it's not necessarily the idea that you put things into a stew and they're no longer identifiable as what they once were. It's more about let them celebrate, the carrots, the peas, the beef, the fish, if you do a fish stew, all of those little individual things that are like aha moments when you come across them. And that gives you the integrity of the whole group. That every once in a while, because it's a natural thing to happen, you do notice that somebody's been doing a damn good job. You know how I know? I haven't had to talk to you in a week. Are you okay? That sort of thing. So the whole idea of a group or a culture or something having a completeness and wholeness, while all of the particles are distinct and they bear the DNA and the history of where they came from, and they're helping to make the conversation that much better, richer, whatever you want to call it. I like, when you say, do you guys all agree that the more times that you reheat stew, the better it gets?
Yes.
I think that's a good metaphor for culture as well. The more often you allow the ingredients to express themselves for who they are and as they are, as opposed to being, I never got into bay leaf. It never really made sense to me when I got a bay leaf and that was in the middle of this beautiful, delicious stew. It's like, man, that's not cool. I mean, it's like, who wants to be the person that gets the bay leaf? I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here. I want to get the bay leaf, said no one ever, But everyone's mom had to put a bay leaf in there. I don't even know if they remember why we do that anymore.
Oh, and I always heard that it was, we always like, I don't know, I've been places where they say it's lucky to get bay leaf, and I'm not sure they said that or if it was just a result of what you just said. No one wants to get it, and they decided to make it.
And a good chef will take it out first.
Right,
And you can always tell what culture you came from by whether or not you're looking forward to getting the worm in a bottle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think the neat thing in terms of having a mini celebration every week, and this week in terms of talking about equilibrium and integration, what I'm coming away with is that for me, the equilibrium is when I'm not being challenged in a moment, I'm at rest. Do you know what I mean? It's like a book on a shelf. Its highest and best use is to be in somebody's lap being looked at, and challenging their intellect and challenging their thinking ability and challenging whatever it is that's challenged, like, the visuals. Were you guys all big readers when you were kids?
Yes.
Yeah. And that does two things for you, by the way. It allows you to learn a lot of words that you have no idea how they're pronounced. That's a very cool thing, where you get to go out and say in front of people for the first time a word and you say it very badly. And the other thing that it does is it allows you to create these monster visuals. I think more than listening to audiobooks, I think listening or reading a typed book allows me, in my experience, to have these unbelievably rich visuals that get created. And oftentimes they don't look anything like the movie, you know? Well, we're not quite at the end here, but did we miss anything? is there something that if we don't get into it, our folks at home they're going to be hanging on their